Welcome back, boxing fans. So, going through Twitter, I saw this individual's pound for pound list. And I'm not being overly critical. I'm just saying it's funny how some people make pound for pound lists that are blatantly just fanboy lists. You can see that you couldn't really justify a list like this. You couldn't really break it down so that other people would see a list in the same fashion you do, right? Like there's a lot of quality lists out there, and then there's a lot of lists that are just fanboy lists. And let's check out this one for number one. This is from a guy named Seja, S-E-J-A, or a girl. Best boxers right now. I will go from number 10 up to number 1. So at number 10, Shakur Stevenson. And Shakur Stevenson in the top 10 pound for pound list is not a terrible thing. Obviously, he's coming off of a poor performance, but that alone doesn't dismiss the fact that he's a 3-weight world champion, and he was unified at 130 pounds. At number 9, Deontay Wilder. Well, Deontay Wilder just got beat in his last fight. And in his last 4 fights, he's only won once. So it's hard to ever imagine a guy who's literally won out of his last 4 as a pound for pound fighter. And what makes it worse is he's a heavyweight who's always been a heavyweight. So he's not even really eligible for a pound for pound list as well. So, you know, at number 8, Usyk. I think most people would feel that number 8 for Usyk was pretty low, considering he's an undisputed cruiserweight champion with a very good resume, literally cleaning out the cruiserweight division before moving to the heavyweight division and becoming a 3-belt unified champion. And the fight coming up between him and Tyson Fury inevitably could make him a 2-weight undisputed champion, joining both Inoue and Bud Crawford as the only fighters in male history to have accomplished that. So that is legendary if he can beat Fury. Obviously, that's a lot to ask for from him because he's a very diminutive fighter compared to Fury, but that's the kind of fighter he is. So to put him at number 8 with some of these other guys ranked ahead of him, you know, that's probably the problem. At number 7, Errol Spence. You have Errol Spence, a guy who just got his ass beat and looks like he's virtually ready to retire. Number 7 on your list, above guys like Usyk. I mean, generally, when you get your ass knocked out in a unification fight for undisputed, the other fighter goes up and becomes pound for pound number 1. Inevitably, you fall off the list and make room for new up-and-comers. It doesn't mean you potentially can't get back on the list, coming back to get a revenge fight or a few very big wins, right, to elevate yourself back onto the list. But coming off of that destructive loss to Bud Crawford, how could anyone put Errol Spence in the top 10? At number 6, not a bad opponent, Teofimo Lopez, obviously coming off of a fantastic win versus Josh Taylor, who was the undisputed 140-pound fighter. That's a quality win, as well as the Lomachenko win, who, you know, really should have made him the undisputed 135-pound fighter. So in truth, Lopez should be a 2-weight undisputed champion. Now, of course, he's clout chasing and calling out Bud Crawford, so he potentially could become a 3-weight undisputed champion. But the likelihood of that happening is probably pretty low. But if he was to do that, then we would really be talking about Lopez as a top pound for pound fighter in boxing, even though that seems virtually impossible. At number 5, Naoya Inoue. And again, this is way too low for a man who's a 4-weight world champion and 2-weight undisputed, right? A guy who is one of the biggest fighters in boxing today. A guy that's virtually becoming a superstar. I mean, obviously that's already established in Japan, but if he goes to Saudi Arabia this year and then actually comes back to the States and fights this year, to fight 3 times this year, man, it's going to be hard not to put him number 1 on the pound for pound list above Bud Crawford. Because the most we could expect Bud Crawford to do next year is probably fight twice, maybe. At least fight once. And outside of that, what opponents? Tim Tszyu, a possible fight, that would be great. The Canelo Alvarez fight, I don't know if that's realistic. At number 4, Devin Haney, right? You put Devin Haney number 4 on the list, but Devin Haney is a 2-weight world champion, undisputed in only one division. Both Usyk and Inoue have done more than Devin Haney. That doesn't downplay, dismiss, or hate on Haney. It's just slow your fucking roll. Be respectful for the people who put in the work and done more. Devin Haney's young, the youngest fighter on this list. So he's got time ahead of him to do great things in the division. But at this point, he hasn't done anything to deserve to be above Usyk and Inoue on a pound-for-pound list. At number 3, Gervonta Tank Davis. Gervonta Tank Davis doesn't deserve to be ahead of fucking Haney. This is a guy who's a 2-weight world champion, literally. Was gifted a vacant title at 135, right? And has never unified. His best win is probably a fight against Mario Barros or Ryan Garcia. And then his 2 other top fights were probably fights against Petraza and Leo Santa Cruz. But yet, one guy was weight trained, another guy was pulled up in his 4th weight division. Then you go to the 2 guys that I mentioned first, both of them were weight trained, right? And the question is, if Pacquiao got so much criticism back in the day, how come Tank Davis gets no criticism today? Virtually zilch, none, nada. He can use catch weights and rehydration clauses, and people act as if it doesn't matter. He's just fighting at an even playing field. At number 2, Terrence Bud Crawford. I mean, if you have Crawford number 1 or number 2, I can't really complain. He's done everything he needed to do to put himself into that conversation. But I do think he deserves to be ahead of the man this guy has, or this girl has, at number 1. And that would be Canelo Alvarez. Not to dismiss Canelo. He's definitely top 5 pound for pound. But ahead of Crawford at this point, ahead of Inoue at this point, ahead of Usyk at this point. No. This is a guy who lost to Bivol convincingly, had 2 less than stellar performances, one against Golovkin and one against John Ryder. Beat Charlo, who looked like garbage in that fight. You know, literally in his last 4 fights, he has not really looked great, right? And obviously we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. Maybe he'll redeem himself and show what he once was. But at this point, it doesn't look like he's at the top of the game. That's all I'm saying. No shade. Obviously, top 5 pound for pound is fantastic. Let's think about some people that aren't on this list and obviously should be. Arthur Beterbiev, like Errol Spence, was a 1-weight 3-belt unified champion with a 100% KO ratio, with just as good, if not better, of a resume than Errol Spence, because none of the guys he fought were going up in weight, going down in weight, right? The guys he was fighting were literally at their best at 175 pounds. Were world champions, were fucking on runs, looking fantastic, looking like killers. So it's hard to see that Beterbiev is not on the list, especially after this great performance you just put on last weekend. Then, of course, you also have Bivol. Bivol, who beat Canelo Alvarez. This person has Canelo Alvarez number 1, but you don't have Bivol in the top 10. And Bivol convincingly beat Canelo Alvarez, and then went on to convincingly beat Zurdo Ramirez, an undefeated 168-pound world champion, right? And easily beat Zurdo. Sent Zurdo fucking to cruiserweight, saying, you got no business in this division, buddy. Get out. So, of course, that's just my take. You may agree with this list. You may agree with me. You may have your own takes. That's cool. We're all here to talk boxing. Let's not get offended because someone's opinion is different. I'm not saying I can't have an opinion. I'm just having an opinion about their opinion. That's it. And I think I justified my opinion very eloquently. So feel free to leave your pound for pound list in the comment section below, or just comment on this one and tell me, do you agree with it, or are some things a little out of whack? Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace out.